Kutcher.
Colleagues, I rise today to speak to Bill S-210, an act respecting Ukrainian Heritage Month. When passed, it will designate September of every year as Ukrainian Heritage Month across Canada, celebrating the contributions that Canadians of Ukrainian ancestry have made to our country. This bill is identical to the one that this chamber passed in November of 2024. It made it to the House, but was caught there. The bill already has a sponsor in the House, and based on the messages of support for Ukraine that we have heard from our colleagues there, I'm hopeful that expeditious passage in this chamber can encourage our friends in the other place to act swiftly. And acting swiftly is important, because as we know, Russia's genocidal war on a sovereign and democratic Ukraine is just now entering a more vicious phase. Russia is not just fighting on the front, it is attacking innocent civilians, killing them at schools, in their places of business, on the street, in their homes, hospitals, and places of worship. Russia is stealing Ukrainian children from their communities, placing them in gulags, forcefully eliminating their ethno-cultural identity, and even indoctrinating some to attack their own kith and kin. It is destroying the environment, planting hundreds and thousands of mines in fields that are essential for growing the world's grain, blowing up religious and cultural sites, and creating hell for people who only want to go about their lives in peace. This genocidal war is taking its toll. An entire generation of young people has been traumatized. Thousands have lost their lives. Many more thousands have lost their limbs or their livelihoods. The damage is unimaginable. And for what purpose? So that Russia can dream of empire yet again? The soft-pedaling approach of graduated containment promoted under the Bush administration, letting Ukraine bleed but not completely bleed out, has been made even worse by the inept and corrupt Trump group. Ukraine, and indeed Europe, is now fighting for its survival, a fight of democracy against tyranny, a fight of hope against despair, a fight of what is right instead of what is might. This bill celebrates Ukrainian heritage in Canada. It reminds us about what people who identify as Ukrainian Canadians have contributed to the making of our country. As such, it is the same as many other bills that we have passed, acknowledging the important contributions and all those peoples whose hands have built this place. We know that heritage means all that we have gathered from the past, those things that we value and enjoy in the present, and that which we strive to preserve and pass on to future generations. Our heritage is a celebration of who we are, what we aspire to be, and the glue that binds us to each other. I'm also bringing forward this bill to honor my Ukrainian heritage with the support and encouragement of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, the Ukrainian diaspora, and recently arrived Ukrainians seeking refuge here. As I do this, I want to acknowledge to each member of this chamber that I also want to learn more about your heritage. For in that mutual journey of discovery, we can hope to better understand each other, and by so doing, together define and develop a better tomorrow. However, I'm also bringing forth this bill again now because I'm sure that all freedom-loving people who believe in the rule of law, democracy, and the sovereignty of states are appalled by what is happening in Ukraine. I'm bringing the bill forward again because we in this chamber, by the small act of passing this legislation, can demonstrate to Ukraine, to Canada, and the rest of the freedom-loving world that we stand for what is right, that we care what happens, that we abhor tyranny, and we want to maintain what is just. Colleagues, times are tough in Ukraine, and times are tough for all of us who have family in or ties to Ukraine. Friends, every morning when I wake up, the first thing that I do is check my WhatsApp to see if my family there has survived the night. I'm hopeful that this bill will be a boost that tells the people of Ukraine that we have their backs, and that encourages those people here in Canada who support Ukraine to not give up, to continue the fight, to continue as long as necessary. I'm privileged to stand here to share with you the story of my parents and grandparents. They came to this country from Ukraine, having lost all of their property, most of their friends, and most members of their families to Russian and Nazi forces. They were amongst the numerous Ukrainians who sought refuge in Canada following World War II. They found a safe landing for their families so that they could live in peace, without fear, and flourish for generations to come. Once here, they became another part of a greater Ukrainian diaspora that traces its roots to the call from Clifford Sifton, Minister of the Interior in the Laurier government, who chose to welcome Eastern Europeans to Canada as an immigration strategy to settle the West. What Sifton wanted was, quote, a stalwart peasant in a sheepskin coat, born on the soil, whose forefathers have been farmers for 10 generations, end of quote. Thousands living in what is now Western Canada answered this call, and by their sweat and toil, helped turn Canada into the agricultural powerhouse that it is today. Indeed, some members of this chamber can trace their family stories back to this time. The bond between Canada and Ukraine has been forged over tens of decades and is still being molded. Since February 2022, many of us have become more aware of these bonds and the history that underlies them. Indeed, colleagues, this is a history that both defines Ukrainian Canadians and binds us to others living in this country whose heritage includes similar horrific memories. It is a history with deep and tragic roots, including about 4 million deaths during the Holodomor, the Stalin-imposed famine, and between 8 and 14 million killed in World War II. All Canadians whose families have suffered similar circumstances wherever in the world that those have occurred understand this. There are now more than 1.4 million people of Ukrainian heritage living in Canada, close to about 4% of the population. My family is counted among those numbers, beginning with my maternal grandparents, parents, myself, 2 brothers, and then our children and 9 grandchildren. As a boy, I didn't speak English until I started elementary school. As was the case in many refugee homes, the mother tongue wasn't the language of my household. Since my grandparents never learned to speak English, Ukrainian was the only language that bound me to them. The years passed, I became more and more removed from my language of origin. The familiarity with the language left. My Baba and Jida, Grandma and Grandpa, were the only people that I spoke Ukrainian to, and after they died, I just stopped speaking the language because I had nobody in my life that I needed to use my mother tongue with anymore. But since the genocidal war on Ukraine began and Canada began to welcome newly displaced Ukrainians, I've been privileged to meet many people from my homeland, and I've come to know a number of these recent arrivals, and has helped encourage me to renew my cultural ties. I actually even began to relearn my mother tongue. I'm improving weekly, thank you Duolingo, and soon hope to be able to speak Ukrainian at the age of 73, as well as I spoke it when I was 6. September is a notable month for Canadians of Ukrainian heritage, as it was in September over 125 years ago, when it's believed the first Ukrainians arrived in Canada. Many of these settled in the prairies and farmed. There are stories of these early prairie settlers being helped by their indigenous neighbors. Indeed, these bonds between indigenous and Ukrainian communities are symbolized by the kokum design. Actually, the tie that I'm wearing now today is a kokum design. There are countless Canadians of Ukrainian heritage who've made contributions. I'll take a moment to highlight only a few. Roberta Bondar, the first Canadian woman and second Canadian in space, a neurologist who's a pioneer in space medicine research. Sylvia Fedoruk, also a medical pioneer working with radioactive isotopes for cancer treatment. She became the first woman chancellor of the University of Saskatchewan and was inducted into Canada's Curling Hall of Fame. She became the lieutenant governor of Saskatchewan in 1988. Ray Natishin's father was Canada's first Ukrainian-born senator. Ray served as a member of the House of Commons, in the cabinets of both Joe Clark and Brian Mulrooney, and in January 1990, he was sworn into the office as Canada's Governor-General, where he coined the phrase, quote, "The Governor-General belongs to the people of Canada," end quote. For decades, Canadian households turned in to test their knowledge with Jeopardy! Alex Trebek's father was born in Ukraine. There are many athletes of Ukrainian descent, including NHL players such as Wayne Gretzky. And my own cousin, Mark Osborne. Mark is well less known than Mr. Gretzky, and sadly, Mark spent more than a decade playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I saw a sign the other day saying, "Spring is here and the Leafs are out." Senators, this chamber currently has members of Ukrainian descent. And we've had senators of Ukrainian descent for quite a while. One distinguished senator was Paul Yutsek, who's been called the father of multiculturalism. He insisted that all ethnic groups deserve to be recognized as partners in the Canadian mosaic. In his speech of 1964, titled "Canada, a Multicultural Nation," he pointed out that Indigenous peoples were in Canada long before the coming of French and English settlers. He saw our multicultural reality as, quote, "unity in our diversity," end quote, and challenged our nation to embrace and celebrate diversity. I hope that all of us in this chamber recognize the value of unity in our diversity. Our task is to better learn how we can harness the good in the ties that bind us while avoiding the incitements of those who would use our diversity as an excuse to rend us asunder. Settlers, we are living in a time that calls for more celebration of the things that bind us together in the face of things that pull us apart. We're living in a time that calls for us to bolster the people of Ukraine and those Canadians who value those ties. This is why I'm seeking your support to move this bill celebrating Ukrainian heritage quickly through this chamber and over to the other place. Дякую, merci, thank you, and we love you.